fate, call it providence or mere chance, but a great number of Nigerians are talking a lot about rape lately, and of course other forms of sexual violence. Let me say this very quickly. The question is not why now, but rather why not now? Welcome to Insights, everyone. I am Nnamdi Odipo.
And I'm Elizabeth Omori. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
This week, we'll take a look at the reported rise in cases of sexual violence in Nigeria and how a lot of survivors are now more open with their stories. This is a special episode on rape culture in Nigeria, and we had a rather large panel of guests to speak on various elements of this issue. Some of the questions were quite difficult to ask, but the answers were profound. My panel is ready, and here with me, my colleague Tamara Ibiwe is joining me as a guest and co-anchor. She will be sharing her thoughts with us on this platform from a very personal point of view. Cynthia Onyewe manages the Chase Troop Foundation, an advocacy and awareness group for child victims of sexual abuse and molestation. You would also learn that our motivation to work with abused children derives from our own very personal experience as well. I have Dr. Ephraim Oluwanuga on standby via Zoom. She is the Chief Consultant Psychiatrist, National Hospital Abuja. I'll begin by welcoming you all to the program. This is quite a sobering topic to talk about, and I would say, Tamara and Cynthia, thank you so much for your willingness to share your stories with us. I know your experiences are in the past, but I do know that these are events you never forget. How critical is it for a survivor to open up and share his or her story? What helps to make that possible? Tamara, can we draw from your experience, please?
I'm glad to be here. First of all, it's a sober experience. Anytime I think about it, I feel like shedding tears, but I'll try to control myself today. I was just 10 years old, just got admission to secondary school. Schools were on strike at about that time, and I was hawking because we were not financially buoyant. I'm from an already separated background. My mom stays on her own, and my dad is on his own with his other wife and the rest of that. So on that fateful day, I was hawking along the streets of Port Harcourt.
I understand how deeply emotive these might bring you up to. Let's just, I think, Tamara, you may not have to share the entire story. Again, I want to say, Tamara, you're a very strong person. I mean, we share in your pain, we share in your strength. I think what is even more significant for us here is how strong you are as a person and who we know you to be today. I would just need you to tell me how important it was for you to come out with this story and not taking us back to the very rigor rather to the experience. Just in going forward, how important was it for you to come out and share your story?
It was really difficult for me to come out initially. Right from my childhood, I've been a very outspoken person. I didn't go through the course of primary school. My mom was a teacher, so I was taught everything from home. I just got to write my common entrance, and since then, I've been this kind of outspoken child. But then, when this occurred, it was a very, very difficult decision for me to take because I had factors to consider: myself, my career, my family, and my dad. In fact, it was even the part of my dad that got me so furious, so angry, that made me share my story. Because I've seen stories about rape online, and I've heard people talk things that are irrelevant. And I've also seen posts where people are calling for justice, protests and all that. So I thought my message now is not about justice from the government, civil society, women organizations fighting for justice. My point is justice begins with the family. Because in my case, I had all evidence. He deflowered me. I was bleeding. His semen was found in me. The thing I was hawking was found in his shop because I couldn't carry it again. I left it and ran to the police station. So we had all the proof. But on the pathway going to court, here comes this man with his brother calling for out-of-court settlement. And my dad, my family, didn't consider the trauma I was going through. They didn't consider what will become of this child. I was intelligent, smart. I heard all their conversations, all their negotiations when I was still trying to recover. But at that point, my pride was substituted with money. That made me hate this man until he passed on last year and I couldn't tell him. So when this issue of Uwa and the rest of that came up and people were like, maybe she jilted the man, the way she was dressed and all that, it got me crazy. I was like, Tamara, you're a broadcaster. You need to speak up. You need to educate people. You need to tell them that there's an aspect they are not looking at. That is justice from the family.
Perhaps, Tamara, you can help us lead the conversation better and engage Cynthia as well.
So before I joined Cynthia, getting out of it, I took to sports. I saw counselors, you know, in my secondary school who told me, you've hated guys and all that. You can have friends from your school, and from that you can build up and get over this. So in associating with guys, I got into sports, got into the man's world, and they called me a tomboy. I didn't care, but at least I'm fine. I furthered my education, and today I'm a career person. So there are different angles to the story. Now, I want you to listen to Cynthia as well, because she has a similar story.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm so glad to be on this platform. My case is, or my story is similar to yours, but just that I didn't even have the opportunity to even speak when it started. It started at about age 5 to 6, and a cousin of mine, you know, I grew up around this houseboy, or you have a relative back in the village comes to Lagos to stay with you and all that. So I was picked from school that day, and all of a sudden I found myself alone in the room, and I don't just want to go, but
Yeah, I understand perfectly, Cynthia.
Yes.
Just like I
Yes.
told Tamara, we don't have to go into the
Yes.
details of
Yeah.
it. I understand how moving and how torturous it
Yes.
can be for you trying to
Yeah.
recollect. So I'll just go ahead and ask you, Cynthia. I know you have been working with little kids.
Yes.
I've been drawing from your experience for some years now.
Yeah.
How shocking are some of the stories that you have heard? And how do you deal with them? Are they similar to the story or to your own experience?
Yes, it's similar. It's similar. Mine was multiple, you know. After one cousin comes, another does the same thing over and over again. And I can attest to with my colleague, it starts from the home. It's always from the home. And that is why Chase Troop has taken its time to educate parents, families, because 85% of these predators are familiar with the children. So it always starts from the home. And this has helped push the foundation, pushed me to set up this platform to help children speak out.
Dr. Oluwanuga, I know you have listened to these stories closely, and it is apparent that the reactions of the first responder in a case involving a victim matters a lot. Ideally, how should such a meeting go in order to reassure that person that no matter what their ordeal is, that they really matter, especially at that point in time?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I want to thank my co-panelists for coming out, because these stories are important to us. They are very painful, but they are the way by which we learn. And I think the first thing that we can see is that these are ladies who have turned out all right. And so they're a model for us to try to help others to come out to be all right. And coming to that, I would say, therefore, that the first response is important, but let me say this, especially because of people who have already gone through it and had a nasty first response. It's important, but you can live without it, even if it goes wrong. And if you are a first responder as a parent and you have done something wrong, you can revisit it. You can revisit it. It's not always the first thing that happens, it's what happens after that and after that and after that. So ideally, the first response should be to reassure the young lady to get medical care, because some of these events are physically traumatic. And so it's important to get a good medical examination for the girl. And then it's important to keep the girl reassured and keep her safe. These are the most important things in the very early stage. And I shall also add, it's important to report it. It's very important to report it as well, because the more we report it, the less people who want to do these things can get away with it. But from the psychological point of view, this will be the most important time to let this young girl know that she's the most valuable person in the whole world, in your life, as a family member. Don't say, now you're useless, you've been deflowered, you are, because unfortunately, there are some who make the child feel like she's become dirty or she's become a disgrace to the family and things like that. It's not about disgrace to the family now. It's about you seeing it as a family, that the family has been robbed. This thing is as bad as armed robbery. It's armed robbery, stealing of this person's
Indeed.
dignity and all that is human in them at that time. And we should treat it like that. You don't blame people and say, how did you let armed robbers enter your house? So that, and the same way that we sympathize, we show care, we make sure that those people are physically all right. It's very important we show it when rape occurs.
Tamara, you nodded and you seemed to agree with what Dr. Olua Nuga was saying, Tamara.
I agree with her absolutely, because the psychological aspect of it is extremely important. Do you know, from that period till now, psychologically, in as much as I try to make myself happy and forget about what happens, every day situations brings it back to my memory. Why? This is somebody that has gone through the university, somebody that has a master's degree, yet they are asking you, why are you not in a stable relationship? Why are you not yet married? Why are you jumping from one man to the other? They would not understand that psychologically, years ago, you have been damaged. So, to get back, in fact, let me tell you that in the course of trying to get my life back as an individual, I have endured abusive relationships. I have been beaten by a boyfriend in court who wanted to marry me. Koboko, machete, he has even broken a glass on my head and all that, just because what will society say if I can't stick to this guy and marry him? You move from that one to another. He keeps demanding for sex all the time, and he wouldn't want to understand where you are coming from. So, professionally, I did not see a psychiatrist. I did not see a psychologist. I just took succor in sports and in myself. And I took a decision that it is not compulsory I get married. Well, a man that loves me for me, that will understand me, will definitely come my way. So I walked away from every relationship, and I tried to focus on my career and other things that would give me joy. So self-esteem that has been tarnished years ago needed to be rebuilt. The stigma I went through, look at me, I'm not ashamed anymore, because I've conquered stigma and the rest of that. So psychologically, work needs to be done on that child immediately and in future, because it's a building process.
Cynthia, would you like to add something to this discourse?
Yes, definitely. I would like to. I understand I understand about the trauma because it had a big toll on me. I never used to feel good about myself. I never felt I could be anything. You know, talking about a relationship, relationships were always zero. Always, I was always the damaged partner. And you know, we live in a society whereby nobody has your time. Nobody has the time to be patient with you. You know, so I got my healing through divine intervention. Permit me to say that. It was divine, it was spiritual for me, and God had to intervene in my own situation because it was bad. I took into eating habits to console my depression. It was really devastating, and that is why my foundation is helping children come out of this, because we live in a society whereby therapists, it's not affordable, and then things go worse. Things go worse. These children go into, you know, more series of abuse. So I can attest to that.
Dr. Olua Nuga, you've heard well, you're listening just as much as I am listening to. I mean, you spoke already to the issue of counseling and how critical it is as part of the first response in the case of alleged or established rape. How do you balance counseling and the need to get justice for a victim as a way of facilitating the healing process? How do you balance that?
I think that they are not mutually exclusive. I think they have to go together, because apart from the initial counseling that you give to the person involved, it's also important to keep counseling throughout the court process, because the court process or the search for justice could be traumatic. It can be painful when, you know, you find somebody trying to defend the utterly indefensible, and people trying to use technicalities and things like that to get over it. That's why they also try to do things like look for out of court settlements and so on. So it's important to keep the victim strong psychologically by counseling along while the search for justice is on. And talking about the search for justice, it's important to remember that these things don't have to happen in the open court at all. Usually, they can be discussed in the judges' chambers. So it doesn't have to be in the court out there in the open where everybody is looking at the usually the judges are sensitive, and they would allow them to come in chambers and listen to them, and they make their pronouncements. So parents should not be afraid necessarily that I can't afford to go to court and so on and so forth. So, and then to the last point about the cost of counseling, I want to say that counseling is not expensive if you know where to go to. If you go to the government hospitals, any government hospital, teaching hospital, state hospital, a hospital like ours, national hospital, any government hospital that has a department of psychiatry, mental health, counseling, even social worker, they can give counseling. Most, you know that HIV is prevalent, so most of the hospitals that give HIV treatment, they also have counselors there, and they are professionally trained. So it's important to just seek some form of counseling, no matter how rudimentary it is. It's better than none at all. And for that, that's not expensive. That is not expensive. If you go to the public hospitals, it's not expensive.
Dr.
And then there are
Oluwa
NGOs
Nuga,
that
thank
do
you
it
so
too.
much for your contribution. But just before I let you go, I know you also listened to the part where Tamara and Cynthia raised the issue about their relationships and how their past experience has continuously impacted in their relationships. How can that challenge be overcome, and how can a survivor have a successful relationship?
Well, for a survivor to have a successful relationship in the future, number one thing is to build on their self-esteem. When a person has self-esteem, the person can hold their own in a relationship. You cannot be a doormat in a relationship whereby, you are the one who has to take everything, take the guilt for everything, just because your self-esteem is damaged. So it's important for a survivor to work on their self-esteem. And for this, they also need the help of everybody, family, friends, a counselor, whoever is helpful and supportive. Spirituality also is very helpful.
Yes.
Spirituality is helpful as well. And then the other thing is set rules, in fact, write them down, things that you want in a relationship. And when you want to enter a relationship with somebody, let the person know, these are the things that I want in a relationship. Are you ready? Are you able to do that? So that the agreement is there from the very beginning. It shouldn't be something that the person will say, you discover along the line, for example, the person is not empathic, the person is not patient, and so on. It's very, very, for a person that will have a relationship with a survivor of rape should be somebody who takes a sexual relationship as something that comes at the very end of a deep emotional relationship.
Indeed, Dr. Oluwanuga. There's so much to say, and we're fast losing time. I'll very quickly like contributions from Tamara and Cynthia. I'll begin with Tamara first.
Well, what more can I say other than lending my voice to talk against rape and to plead for support for survivors? It is not easy to come out of it. But of course, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Cynthia?
Definitely. I would like to add that parents should do all they can to protect their kids. You have no business having children if you can't take care of them. It's your job, it's your duty to take care of your children. Please, we are appealing to parents, please take care of your children.
One more word,
Yes,
Nnamdi.
Tamara, please go ahead quickly.
Money should not suffice for justice.
Indeed, very true. Tamara, Cynthia, Dr. Oluwanuga, I will sign you all out for now, but please be on standby. And as I bring on some new guests to join our conversation, at this point, I know in general it is hard to determine the prevalence of rape in a country like Nigeria. Most victims are often scared to tell anyone about what happened or even go to the police. The result is a high number of undocumented rape cases and traumatized victims. Come to think of it, do existing laws offer enough as punishment to deter perpetrators? Where we will be having a new set of panelists join us for our conversation. The Deputy Commissioner of Police, CIDF City Command, Abdul-Yari Lafia, joins us now in the studio. We also have the former National President, Federation of International Women Lawyers, FIDA, and current Chairman, Nigerian Bar Association, FCT branch, Awal Shekarau. Also joins us for this conversation. We also have women rights activist Dr. Eleanor Nwadinobi. She's also part of our panel. Welcome to Insights, everyone. I'll begin with the NBA, Madam Chairperson. Within the context of our existing laws that define rape and other forms of sexual abuse, do you consider these laws progressive enough, or perhaps there are loopholes that allow alleged perpetrators to circumvent our laws and escape justice? Madam Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I want to say that before 2015, the laws that we have governing sexual violence, domestic violence, and all that is the penal code as applicable in the northern parts of Nigeria and the criminal code as applicable in the southern part of Nigeria. Now, because of the fact that these penal codes and the criminal codes were not as effective as making sure that perpetrators of sexual violence and domestic violence were not brought to book. Women's rights groups all over Nigeria came together in a coalition and began to press, for the passage of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill, which by 2015 was signed into law at the wee days of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. Precisely in May 2015, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill, as passed by the National Assembly, was signed into law. Now, this law is act is a very revolutionary, piece of law, because it completely changed the definition of rape.
Okay.
In the past, only, that is in the penal codes and criminal codes, only a man can rape. But because of what we have been seeing in our societies today, you hear cases of women, inflicting sexual violence on men. We've also seen cases where women sexually even assault their female counterparts and all that. So the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, this has now made it a crime, and rape, has now made it such that both a man and a woman can actually commit rape. So this is very revolutionary, and it takes care of all different scenarios that you can think of in terms of the crime of sexual violence or domestic violence, as you may.
I will be back to you in a moment, but before then, let me go over to the DCP. We have heard of cases where an officer of the law who may have responded to an alleged rape case, of course, involving rape, begins to blame the victim for either his or her dressing, and alluding that such explicit dressing may have encouraged the rape. What is the standard practice for officers of the law who make initial contact with an alleged rape victim?
Thank you very much for that very thought-provoking question. But before I go to that, let me quickly, with due respect to my colleague here, said that the penal code is a very extant law, and the criminal code. Actually, when those laws were promulgated, they addressed the issues as it were at that time. Yes, the VAP Act is revolutionary. It merely addressed some other developments prior to when it was promulgated. Coming to what you've just said, the police is a trained outfit to enforce all laws that are given, prescribed in the Constitution, and rape has become an issue in Nigeria due to psychological and certain socio-logical factors in this country. We in Nigeria, usually our behaviors were usually being influenced by certain factors. So we categorize offenses that are influenced due to some of the sociological and cultural factors. So you hear situations where they said police officers usually tend to blame the victims. We are not saying that that is correct, but you see, in the enforcement of law and order, there's what is called contributory negligence when it comes to the enforcement of law and order. In most cases, victims of crime may, one way or the other, have contributed in the crime being committed against them. For instance, you go to bed, you don't lock your door, that is contributory negligence. You don't need the police to come and tell you lock your door. But on the issue of rape, let me address that issue. We are not unmindful of the fact that some officers do not have the grasp of what it takes to address some of these issues, because rape is a little bit technical in terms of investigation, in terms of understanding, in terms of even enforcing, with the main objective of getting or attaining or getting the person who has committed an offense to be convicted. So therefore, to address this, the police had established JWCs all over the commands in the divisional level And these are officers that are trained to man these desks. And mostly we pick officers that are trained, and most of the officers are dominated by female who actually understand where it fits. Then at the command level, at the CID level where I so pretend, you discover that we have a gender desk officer that is responsible for some of this gender-based violence. In fact, because of some of the challenges, we're even recalling it and call it the anti-rape and other related offenses. So the officers are trained to ensure that some of these observations, some of these outcry by members of the public that the victims are usually being blamed are actually taken care of and are being handled by trained officers who address the issues based on the crime.
Great. So we're seeing some sort of reform already taking place. Let me quickly move over to Dr. Nwadinobi. You've heard the DCP respond to the issue of victim blaming. Why is this still a massive issue in Nigeria as against sympathy and support for victims?
It is a massive issue in Nigeria. First of all, because there is a normalization of violence in our country that has deep, very deep, traditional and cultural, beginning as the international president of the Medical Women's International Association. That means that I preside over female doctors in over 90 countries. I would like to emphasize that, sadly, this is not peculiar to Nigeria. Sexual violence, sadly, occurs in several countries around the world. However, what is truly unacceptable is the fact that there is a culture of silence where the victim or the survivor is blamed. She has to be the one to prove that she's been sexually violated. There is a culture of impunity. I recently was working with a program called the Nigeria Policing Program as the gender advisor. And DCP, yes, you have talked about training, you have talked about contributory negligence, but I have to say categorically that the Nigeria police force, it is not yet Uhuru in the way they are able to respond to reports of rape. When you say contributory negligence, the countless number of children, sometimes at the age of 6 months, how can anybody talk about contributory negligence?
Indeed.
And the minute you begin to ask questions as to what a woman is wearing or not wearing, as the case may be, or where she happens to be at any time of the day or night, then you are already blaming somebody who is a victim. I want us to shift the prism and shift the radar to the perpetrators. Why are parents neglecting their duties at home in training their boys and girls to respect one another? This narrative should change for boys and men to zip up. Whether a woman is naked or not, if a boy child is trained to zip up and respect a woman, you cannot begin to talk of anything being contributory.
Dr.
We must respect the dignity of every woman and girl on earth.
Dr. Wadinobi, since you're on this subject already, maybe I could as well just bring up the issue of consent, like I did promise Madam Chairperson that she will be talking about. But I think we'll take up that conversation with you, and then we'll move on over to her to get our own definition of consent. How would you, at this point in time, since you've already made allusions to the men folk zipping up and all of that, puts in context, not very broad-based, but very quickly too, because we're fast losing time, the issue of consent and at what point consent begins, and if there is a line that one could cross over when it comes to the issue of consent in relationship between a man and a woman now, that might likely lead to an incident of rape.
Yes, when you are talking about consenting adults in the privacy of their lives, in their private spaces, it's a completely different conversation altogether. I would like to put it to you and to the world. How do you begin to think of consent in the context of early and forced marriage? Once a child is a child is a child, and she is married as a child, that in itself, once there is sexual intercourse, is rape, because no child will consent to being forcefully, to have sexual intercourse forcefully. Once it is forced, that is rape. So I am talking of women and girls of all ages.
I get that,
and
Dr.
it is a totally different line when you're talking of consenting adults.
Perfect, I get that. Let's quickly bring on Madam Chairman. What's your definition of consent? And please quickly react to some of the issues that Dr. Wadinobi has raised.
You see, in law, consent must be very clear and definitive. You cannot assume consent when we are talking about particularly sexual violence. And the law is also very categorical. Only a person who has reached the age of majority, that is from the age of 18, can that person give a valid consent. For somebody who is below that age, even if the person says yes, the law regards it that that person has not reached that age that they can validly give consent. And that is why having any sexual intercourse with somebody who is 17, whether the person says yes or no, the first person loves it or not, is legally speaking rape, statutory rape. So there is this here is saying, I mean, growing up, we used to hear some of our male friends and colleagues say